power, and she's going to own that decision.
Charles, the prosecutor's office warned us today to not use this as a factor in any way trying to figure out where this is going, but all the pros I talked to, they see it as an increasing likelihood that she will bring charges, since the grand jury is the easier way to just wash your hands of the responsibility.
Well, that's one way to look at it, right? So it's all, at this point, speculation. As Natalie just pointed out, only if it was a capital case would it go before a grand jury. No one, not the attorneys for Trayvon Martin or for George Zimmerman, are suggesting there was premeditation in this case. It wouldn't even make sense, actually, that he would call the cops, then stalk, wanting to kill right before the cops arrived, and then, you know, try to get his way out of it. So that doesn't even make sense. So no one is even suggesting that. That just takes that off the table. It could be the case that this, you know, the state's attorney wants to make an arrest, and in fact, the local television station in that market, WFTV, has, you know, a story today saying that 2 sources have told them that there is likely to be an arrest this week. They're unnamed sources. You take that with a boulder of salt, not just a grain of salt. But there may be an arrest. It is just as likely that there is some debate within that office as to whether or not they have enough evidence. Do they have enough evidence to prove this case beyond the shadow of a doubt, or do they want to just compile as much evidence as they can to make sure they have an airtight case? All of those things are possibilities. We can only speculate at this point. I think it's really prudent for us to step back and say, we don't know at this point. We have to let the investigation play out, and the state attorney will make their decision when they're ready to make that decision.
Natalie, you're in touch with some of the witnesses in this case. For example, Trayvon's girlfriend. Has the special prosecutor talked to her?
They have. That office has spoken to the girlfriend, and really she's the connection of all the dots here. We've had the 911 tape, and when I say the 911 tape, I'm talking about George Zimmerman's own words. So we've had that. When that tape came out, we were sure there would be an arrest, and there wasn't. And then the next thing that we saw videotape, and we once again were sure that an arrest would be made. It wasn't. Once we saw the phone records of the teenager, we thought, surely there's an arrest. The dots have been connected. This teenage girl says that she heard the argument and that George Zimmerman was the provoker. So at this point, we believe that if people just listen and look at the evidence, or it's not even evidence right now, what's in the media, with their own eyes and ears, there's enough there's enough information to bring this to a trial and let a jury decide.
And Charles, the advantage the prosecutor has that none of us have is that in her ability to round up all of these witnesses that we know about and evaluate their credibility, which is not something you can really do in the ways that they've appeared on television. And I'm not faulting anyone; it's just the way it is. You don't really cross-examine them. You don't really find out every little bit of the way they think about it. And so it would seem that the special prosecutor. Again, I'm trying to imagine what she had in mind today, for example, when she reached out to those protesters and got on the phone with them. Other than trying to diffuse tensions at the scene, she seemed to be trying to communicate something positive, in a sense, to that side of this story.
Well, I mean, I think you raised the crucial point, which is the state attorney and the special prosecutor have a vantage point that none of us have. You know, there's interest, there's information that comes from people speaking anonymously, speaking behind screens, speaking in shadows, but they have a different vantage point. They get to talk to the person. They get to question them in the way that a defense attorney would question them to see if there are holes in their testimony, in what would become their testimony if it were to go to trial. They get to kind of cross-tab all of what they're hearing, one thing against another, and hear from people that we may not even be hearing from. And most importantly, they get to see the medical examiner's report, which none of us have seen. and all the forensic information that none of us have seen. So they have just a higher level of information than anyone in the media can possibly have. So at that point, you do have to step back and say, we must wait until they present whatever they have gathered to the public to even make some sort of evaluation as to whether or not we believe that they should have gone forward with charges if they choose not to do that.
Charles M. Blow, that's the perfect summary of where we stand tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight, Charles, and Natalie Jackson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.